Once upon a time, there was a little boy, upon whom his mother and father showered nothing but love, kindness, warmth, all that stuff. He had his own little room in a big house in the middle of a pretty forest. He wanted for nothing. All the toys in the world were his. All the paints, all the books, papers, pens. All the seeds of creativity were implanted in him from an early age, and it was writing that became his first love. Short stories, fairy tales, little novels, all happy, colourful things about bears and piglets and angels and so forth. And some of them were good. Some of them were very good. His parents' experiment had worked. The first part of his parents' experiment had worked. It was on the night of his 7th birthday that the nightmares first started. The room next door to his own room had always been kept bolted and padlocked for reasons the boy was never quite sure of, but never quite questioned, until the low whirring of drills, the scritchly scratch of bolts being tightened, the dull fizz of unknown things electrical, and the muffled scream of a gagged child began to emanate through its thick brick walls on a nightly basis.
What were all those noises last night?
He'd ask after each long, desperate, sleepless night, to which his mother would ever reply,
"Oh, little cat, it's just your wonderful but overactive imagination playing tricks on you." Oh, do all little boys my age hear such sounds of abomination like this?
No, my darling. Only the extraordinarily talented ones.
Oh, cool.
and that was that. And the boy kept on writing, and his parents kept encouraging him with the utmost love. But the sounds of the words and screams kept going on, and his stories got darker and darker and darker. They got better and better due to all the love and encouragement, as is often the case, but they got darker and darker due to the constant sound of child torture, which is also often the case. It was on the day of his 14th birthday, a day he was waiting to hear the results of a story competition he was shortlisted for, that a note slipped out from under the door of the locked room. A note which read, "They have loved you and tortured me for 7 straight years for no reason other than as an artistic experiment. An artistic experiment which has worked. You don't write about little green pigs anymore, do you?" The note was signed, "Your brother." And the note was written in blood. The boy axed through the door to find his parents sitting there, smiling, alone. His father doing some drill noises, his mother doing the sound of a gagged child. They had a little pot of pig's blood between them, and his father told him to look at the other side of the blood-written note. The boy did, and found out he'd won the $50 first prize in the short story competition. They all laughed. The second part of his parents' experiment was complete. They moved house soon after that, and though the nightmare sounds had ended, his story stayed strange and twisted, but good, and he was able to thank his parents for the weirdness they'd put him through. And years later, on the day that his first book was published, he decided to revisit his childhood home for the first time since he'd left. He idled around his old bedroom, and all the toys and paints were still littered there. And then he went into the room beside it, and it still had the old dusty drills and padlocks and electrical cord lying around, and he smiled at the insanity of the very idea of it all. But he lost his smile when he came across the corpse of a 14-year-old child that had been left to rot in there, barely a bone of which wasn't broken or burned, in whose hand there lay a story scrawled in blood. And the boy read that story, a story that could only have been written under the most sickening of circumstances, and it was the sweetest, gentlest thing he'd ever come across. But what was even worse, it was better than anything he himself had ever written, or ever would. So the boy burnt the story, and he covered his brother back up, and he never mentioned a word of what he had seen to anybody. Not to his parents, not to his publishers, not to anybody. the final part of his parents' experiment was over. Katurian's story, the writer and the writer's brother, ended there in fashionably downbeat mode, without touching upon the equally downbeat but somewhat more self-incriminating nature of the truer story. And after he'd read the blood-written note and broken into the next-door room, it was, of course, his brother he found there, but alive, brain-damaged beyond repair. And that night, whilst his parents were sleeping, the 14-year-old birthday boy held a pillow over his father's head for a while. And after waking her just a moment to let her see her dead blue husband, he held a pillow over his mother's head for a while too.
Read it to me.
The whole of it?
The whole of it. Standing.
Feels like school somehow.
Yeah. Except at school, they don't execute you at the end. Unless you went to a really fucking tough school.
Once upon a time, in a tiny cobble-streeted town on the banks of a fast-flowing river, there lived a little boy who did not get along with the other children of the town. They picked on and bullied him because he was poor and his parents were drunkards and his clothes were rags and he walked around barefoot. The little boy, however, was of a happy and dreamy disposition, and he did not mind the taunts and the beatings and the unending solitude. He knew that he was kind-hearted and full of love, and that someday, someone somewhere would see this love inside him and repay him in kind. Then, one night, as he sat nursing his newest bruises at the foot of the wooden bridge that crossed the river and led out of town, he heard the approach of a horse and cart along the dark cobbled street, and as it neared, he saw that its driver was dressed in the darkest of robes, the black hood of which bathed his craggy face in shadow and sent a shiver of fear through the little boy's body. Putting his fear aside, the boy took out the small sandwich that was to be his supper that night, and just as the cart was about to pass on to and over the bridge, he offered it up to the hooded driver to see if he would like some. The cart stopped, the driver nodded, got down and sat beside the boy, and the boy shared the sandwich with him, and they talked about this and that. And as the boy told the driver of his poor, hard life, he eyed the back of the driver's cart and saw that it was piled high with small, empty animal cages, all foul-smelling and dirt-lined. And just as the boy was about to ask what kind of animals had been inside them, the driver stood up and announced that he had to be on his way. "But before I go," the driver whispered, "because you've been so kindly to an old weary traveller in offering half of your already meagre portions, I would like to give you something now, the worth of which you may not realize today, but one day, when you're a little older perhaps, I think you will truly value and thank me for. Now close your eyes." And the little boy did what he was told, and he closed his eyes. And from a secret inner pocket of his robes, the driver pulled out a long, sharp and shiny meat cleaver, raised it high in the air, and brought it scything down onto the boy's right foot, severing all 5 of his muddy little toes. And as the little boy sat there, in gaping, silent shock, staring blankly off into the distance at nothing in particular, the driver gathered up his bloody toes, tossed them away to the gaggle of rats that had begun to gather in the gutters, got back onto his cart, and quietly rode on over the bridge, leaving the boy, the rats, the river, and the quiet town of Hamelin far behind him. Of Hamelin. See?
Of him.
Do you get it? The little boy, he's the little crippled boy who can't keep up when the Pied Piper comes to take the children away. Yeah, that's how he was crippled.
I know that.
Well, it's a twist.
I know it was a twist.
It's the children he was after.
The children who was after?
It's the children the Pied Piper was after to begin with. My idea was that he brought the rats. You know, he brought the rats. He knew that the townspeople wouldn't pay. It was the children he was after to begin with. No, that's just silly.
It's not just silly. It's good. Do the little green pig. I was trying to remember it just now.
No. I'll do a different one. What'll I do?
Do the Pillowman.
Why the Pillowman? Jeez, that's from a while ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it's from like a while ago.
Alright, how does that one start?
Once upon a time.
No, I know, I'm trying to think of her actual
Once upon a time.
Oh, right, Jesus. Once upon a time, there was a man who was not like normal men. He was about 9 feet tall, and he was all made up of these big fluffy pillows. You know, his arms were pillows, and his legs were pillows, and his body was a pillow, and his head was even a pillow, a big round pillow.
A circular pillow.
It's the same thing.
I prefer a circular pillow.
His head was a big circular pillow, and on his head he had 2 button eyes and a big smiley mouth that was always smiling, so you could always see his teeth, which were also pillows, little pillows.
Pillows. Do your mouth smiley, you know, like the Pillowman's mouth is.
Now, the Pillowman, he had to look like this, you know, he had to look soft and safe because of his job. Because his job was a very sad and very difficult one.
Uh-oh. Here it comes.
Whenever a man or a lady was very, very sad, because they just had an awful, dreadful life, they just wanted to end it all. They just wanted to take the pain away. Well, just as they were about to do it, by razor, by bullet, or by gas.
Or by jumping off something big.
Yes, by whatever preferred method of suicide. Preferred is probably the wrong word. But just as they were about to do it, the Pillowman would go to them, and he'd sit with them for a while, and gently hold them. And he'd say, hold on a minute. And time would slow strangely. And as time slowed, the Pillowman would go back in time to when that man or that lady was just a little boy or a little girl. And the Pillowman's job was very sad, because it was the Pillowman's job to get that child to kill themselves, and so avoid the years of horror that were to await them. Now, I've never heard of a small child killing themselves, you might say. Well, the Pillowman would always do it in a way that made it look like some sort of a tragic accident. You know, he'd show them the bottle of pills, just like Sweeties. He'd show them the spot on the river where the ice was too thin. He'd show them the parked cars where it was really dangerous to dart out between. He'd show them the plastic bag with no breathing holes and exactly how to tighten it. Because mummies and daddies always found it easier to come to terms with a 5-year-old lost in a tragic accident than with a 5-year-old who had seen how shitty life is and has taken action to avoid it. Now, not all the children would go along with the Pillowman. No, there was one little girl, a happy little thing, just couldn't believe her life could be awful, and her life would be. So she sent the Pillowman away, and he went away. He went away crying big gloopy tears that made puddles this big. And the next night, there was another knock on her door. And she said, "Go away, Pillowman. I told you, I'm happy. I've always been happy. I'll always be happy." But it wasn't the Pillowman. It was another man. And her mommy wasn't home. And this man would visit her every time her mommy wasn't home. And she soon became very, very sad. And as she sat in front of the oven when she was 21, she said to the Pillowman, "Why didn't you try to convince me?" And the Pillowman said, "I tried to convince you, you were just too happy." And as she turned on the gas, as high as it would go, she said, "But I've never been happy. I've never been happy."
Can you skip on to the end, please? This bit's a bit boring.
Oh, that's a bit rude, Mitchell.
Oh,
Actually.
well, I'm sorry, Katurian. But could you skip to the end, please?
Alright, the end of the Pillowman. So, when the Pillowman was successful in his work, a small child would die horrifically. And when the Pillowman was unsuccessful, a child would have a horrible life, grow into an adult who had a horrible life, and then die horrifically. So the Pillowman, you know, as big as he was and as fluffy as he was, he'd just be crying all day long. You know, his house would just be puddles everywhere. So he decided he'd do one last job, then that'd be it. So he went back to this place that he remembered from a time before.
Ooh, I like this bit.
And he brought a little can of gasoline with him. And there was this pretty little stream by this big willow tree. And under the willow tree there were all these toys littered about.
Say what the toys was.
And there was a little toy car, and a little toy dog, and a kaleidoscope.
Wait, there was a little toy dog? Did it yap?
Did it what?
Did it yap?
Yes. Anyway, there was a caravan nearby, and he heard the door open, and he heard a little boy call out, "I'm just going out to play, Mom." And he heard the mom say, "Well, don't be late for your tea, son." "I won't be, Mom." And he saw the branches of the willow tree parted, and he saw that it wasn't a little boy he heard at all. No, it was a little pillow boy. And the pillow man said hello to the pillow boy, and the pillow boy said hello to the pillow man, and they both sat and they played with the toys for a while.
The car and the kaleidoscope and the little toy dog that yapped. I bet mostly with the little toy dog though, yeah?
Yes, and the pillow man, he told the pillow boy all about his sad life, and dead kids, and his terrible job, and all that, and the pillow boy, he understood instantly, because he was such a happy little fella, and all he ever wanted to do was to be able to help people. So, the pillow boy poured the can of gasoline all over himself. He struck a match, and he asked the pillow man, "Will you tell my mommy I won't be home for my tea?" And the pillow man said, "Yes, I will," lying. And as the pillow boy slowly started to melt away, the pillow man slowly started to fade away. And the last thing the pillow man ever saw was the pillow boy's happy smiling mouth, which was still smiling, as it slowly started to melt away, stinking into nothingness. And that was the last thing the pillow man ever saw. The last thing he ever heard was something he hadn't quite contemplated. The last thing he ever heard was the screams of the 100,000 children he'd helped to commit suicide as they came back to life and went on to lead the horrible, dreadful lives that were always destined to them, right on up to their horrible, self-inflicted deaths, which this time, of course, would be conducted entirely alone. Once upon a time, in a land not so very far away, there lived a little girl. And although this little girl's gentle parents hadn't raised her very religiously at all, she was quite determined that she was the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. Which was somewhat strange for any 6-year-old. She'd go around in a beard and sandals, blessing stuff. She could forever be found walking amongst the poor and the homeless, consorting with the drunks and the drug addicts, and generally consorting with the sort of person her mommy and daddy didn't deem suitable for a 6-year-old to be consorting with. Each time they would drag her home from some unsavory sort, her parents would say to her,
Jesus never stomped his feet.
Or threw his dollies about.
and she'd reply,
That was the old Jesus, get it?
well, one day the little girl slipped away yet again, and for 2 horrifying days her parents could find neither hide nor hair of her, until they received a distraught call from a priest they didn't know, saying,
You better get down to the church. Your daughter's down here giving us a lot of shit. It was cute at first, now it's just irritating.
well, her parents didn't care about all that. They were just happy to hear that she was alive and well, and they sped downtown to pick her up. But in their haste, they careened into an oncoming meat truck, were beheaded, and died. The little girl was informed of the news, and she cried one single tear, and not a single tear more, as she thought Jesus would have done if he'd lost his parents in a vehicular beheading. And she was sent away by the state to live in a forest with some abusive foster parents, who hadn't informed the state that they were abusive on the form, who hated religion, who hated Jesus, who hated anybody, in fact, who didn't hate anybody, and who, as would follow, hated the little girl. She bore their hate with a happy heart and forgave them, but this didn't seem to work. When she insisted on attending church on a Sunday, they took her sandals away, forcing her to walk there barefoot and alone, over craggy roads with broken glass. Yet when she got there, she'd kneel for hours, praying to her Father in heaven to forgive them, only to get told off for bleeding all over the church. She receive a beating for arriving late home, though no time had been set for her arrival. She'd receive a beating for sharing her food with poor children at school. She'd receive a beating for cheering up the ugly kids. She'd receive a beating for wandering about looking for lepers. Her life was a constant torture. But she bore it all with a smile, and it all only made her stronger. Until this one day, she met a blind man, waiting by the roadside. She mixed a little of her spittle in the dust. She rubbed it in his eyes. He reported her to the police for rubbing dust and spittle in his eyes. And when her parents brought her back from the police station, they said to her,
So, you want to be just like Jesus, do you?
and she said,
Finally, you fucking get it!
and they stared at her for a while. And then it started. Her foster mother embedded in her daughter's head a crown of thorns made of barbed wire, because she was too lazy to make a proper crown of thorns, while her foster father whipped her with a cat o' nine tails. And after an hour or two of that, they asked her when she regained consciousness,
So, still want to be like Jesus?
and she said,
Yes, I do.
so they made her carry a heavy wooden cross around the sitting room 100 times until her legs buckled and her shins broke, and she could do nothing but stare down at her little broken legs going the wrong way. And they said to her,
Do you still want to be like Jesus?
and she almost got sick for a second, but she swallowed it so she wouldn't look weak. She looked them in the eye, and she said,
Yes, I do.
and then they nailed her hands to the cross. And they bent her legs around the right way, and they nailed her feet to the cross. They stood the cross up against the back wall, and they left her there, while they watched television. And when all the good programs were over, they sharpened a spear. They said to her,
So, still want to be like Jesus?
and the little girl swallowed her tears, and she took a deep breath, and she said,
No, I don't want to be like Jesus. I fucking am Jesus!
and her parents stuck the spear in her side. And they left her there to die. And they went to bed. And in the morning they were quite surprised to find that she wasn't dead. So they took her down off the cross, and they buried her, alive, in a little coffin with just enough air to breathe for 3 days. The last thing she heard was her parents calling out,
So, if you're just like Jesus, you'll rise again in 3 days, won't you?
and the little girl thought about it for a while. She smiled to herself, and she whispered,
Exactly. Exactly.
and she waited, and she waited, and she waited. 3 days later, a man walking out of the woods stumbled over a small, freshly dug grave, but as the man was quite blind, he carried on by, sadly not hearing a horrible scratching of bone upon wood a little way behind him. Ever so slowly faded away and was lost forever in the black, black gloom of the empty, empty, empty forest. Alright,
Little Green Pig, I don't remember how it goes.
Come on, Katurian, you remember how it goes. First word is once, and the second word is upon, and then the third word goes and the fourth word. What's the fourth?
You're a little smart.
Time.
Yeah.
Fourth word goes time. Once upon
All right.
time.
Alright, settle down.
once upon a time,
It's like the good old days. Good old days stories.
once upon a time, on a farm, a strange land, far away,
Far away.
there lived a little pig, who was different from all the other pigs around.
He was green.
Are you telling the story or am I?
Sorry, fingers on lips. Shh.
The little pig was different from all the other pigs because he was bright green, like almost glow-in-the-dark green.
Glow in the dark green? Like the pink they have in the railway tunnels? Like the glow in the dark they have in the railway tunnels?
Yes. Yes. Now, are we interrupting, or are we listening and sleeping?
Listening and sleeping.
Good. Now, the little green pig, he really liked being green. Not that he didn't like the colour of normal pigs, he thought that pink was nice too, but what he liked was, he liked being a little bit different, a little bit peculiar. And now the other pigs, they didn't like him being green. No, they were jealous and they bullied him and they made his life his
Misery.
and all this complaining, well, it just aggravated the farmers.
What's aggravated? Sorry, Katurian.
It's all right. It just means it got on their nerves.
Got on their nerves.
Yeah, it got on the nerves of the farmers, and they thought, oh, we better do something about this. So what they did was, they went out onto the fields where all the pigs were sleeping, and they snatched the little green pig up, and they brought him to the barn.
Bastards?
Yeah, when they got him back to the barn, they had this very special pot of pink paint, and they dunked him in it till he was covered from head to foot. Not a patch of green was left. And what was special about this paint was it could never be washed off, and it could never be painted over. It could never be washed off, it could never be painted over. And the little green pig, he cried out, oh, please, God, please don't make me like all the rest. I'm happy being a little bit peculiar.
I'm happy being a bit peculiar, he said to God.
Yeah. But it was too late. The paint was dry. And the farmers, they brought him back out onto the field, and all the other pigs just laughed at him. And as he passed by and he sat down on his favourite little patch of grass, he tried to understand why God hadn't listened to his prayer. But he couldn't understand. And he cried himself to sleep. And all the 1,000 tears he cried could never wash off the horrible pink paint, because
Never be washed off. Could never be painted over.
exactly, he went to sleep. And that night, while all the pigs lay sleeping in the fields, these strange storm clouds began to circle overhead. It began to rain, gently at first, but then heavier and heavier and heavier. But this was no ordinary rain, no, this was a very special green rain, almost as thick as paint. But what was also special about it could never be washed off, could never be painted over, could never be washed off, could never be painted over. And the morning came, and all the pigs awoke. They found that every single one of them had turned bright green. Every single one, except, of course, the little green pig, who was now the little pink pig, who hadn't turned green because of the unpaint-overable paint the farmers had covered him in earlier. Unpaint-overable? Well, the little green pig, now the little pink pig, he was happy, and he smiled to himself, and he thanked goodness. Thank God. Because he knew that he was, and he always would be, just a little bit peculiar.